the subject is such an enormous subject. I'd like to just talk about the general subject of religion and point out all of the many, many hidden potholes and rocks under the water that you'll not see in religion. And so much of what we call the religious world today is absolutely, it's an incredible story of how much people are not being told about their religious belief systems and where these ideas have come from, etc. So I've always felt it would be a great idea to just look at the whole subject of religion, no matter which one. There's so many of them. We will, of course, concentrate on the big three, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. But very few people have ever asked themselves, why do we have the big three? Why is there always a big three? The three major religions. And in the three major religions, you have the God of the three major religions is always a triune God. He's always divided into three persons, the one God. And but three plays a big important issue in the secret societies that started our different religions. Most people don't know that our religions came from secret groups and secret societies in history that have come up with an idea and promoted it. They had the opportunity to promote it because they had the money and they owned the means of communication, so they promoted it around town, and it grew until finally today we have all the big religions of the world today, never realizing that just about all of the major religions in the world today are the work of secret societies and fraternal orders that you don't even know about, you've never heard of before. So I just felt that it would be interesting just to look at religion, because there's so much in religion that people have taken for granted, which is not true. I mean, I'll give you a little small classic example. I mean, you see the Statue of Liberty on Liberty Island in New York. First of all, there's a lot of indication that the Statue of Liberty is not a woman, it's a man. Most people don't know that. It's a man, not a woman. And it's not the Statue of Freedom, it's the Statue of Liberty. This is why it's on an island in the water, because liberty is a term, an international monetary term, that means, this is what a sailor gets when he pulls into port on the ship in the Navy. You ask permission to go up, to go on land. So if the captain gives you permission, and he may not, but if he gives you permission to go on land, then you have liberty. So you are at liberty to go wherever you want. But, he didn't say you were free. You just don't walk off the ship when you get ready. No, you ask permission. So that's why it's called the Statue of Liberty, not freedom. So in America, you're not free. You ask permission. You get a license. You pay the fine. You pay the ticket. You ask the government for permission to do whatever. Virtually everything you do, you must get a permit from the government, a license. You pay a fee to be able to do something. So that's what the Statue of Liberty has given to America. You just ask permission. There is no freedom in America. Never has been. So there may have been a little bit of that taste of freedom at the very beginning, but it was quickly rubbed out in America, because the people who run this world were not about to have people on the earth who could dance around and call themselves free. Europe was anything but free. And so the people who ran Europe, remember, the people who ran Europe ran the world. And so they're not interested in hearing some of those smaller colonies that they owned and financed and organized and directed around the world under the British Empire, were all of a sudden deciding they were going to be free. They didn't need to ask the British government for anything. They were going to be free people. Well, that didn't last very long. Nobody's going to be free, period. And so, one of the things which has been used to manipulate the populations and the peoples of this world is religion, of course. And so I just thought it'd be interesting to look at some of the interesting facts about religion that we're not aware of. Let's start with the three major religions, as I said: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. I, for one, myself, this is just my idea, my idea based on the past 58 years, 59 years now of looking at theology. My conclusion is that Christianity was the first religion. Judaism did not precede Christianity. Christianity preceded Judaism. Judaism was dreamt up as a religion in the AD. There was no BC religion of Judaism or ancient Israel or the ancient religion of the Jews going back to ancient Israel. My feeling is, based on what I've seen in the past close to 60 years, is there was no ancient Israel, period. There was no such a problem and no such a state as Israel. It never existed. It's nothing but a theology that was dreamt up during probably the early Middle Ages. I would say probably about the 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th century AD was being developed in Europe, the concept or the idea that there was an ancient Israel, and that ancient Israel taught this and ancient Israel taught that. But when you begin to really do some homework on it, you'll find out there was no ancient Israel. It never existed. So the whole thing was just a story. And so that's what I hope to be able to help people to learn, is that there was no ancient Israel, period. So don't look back to the ancient prophets and the ancient writings, because all of those ancient so-called writings of the ancient Hebrews were actually Knights Templar Masonic documents, probably dreamt up during the 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th century A.D. in Europe by the Masonic orders coming out of the Roman Catholic Church, Knights Templars, and also then added to, once you had the Crusades, when the Pope Innocent sent the Catholic Knights of Malta and the Masonic Order of Knights into the Middle East to get rid of the Islamic influence. And when those Christian knights came back after the Crusade, they had learned a lot while they were in the Middle East. They learned the alcohol, the drinks, they learned the customs of the people. They learned from the assassins how to kill. They learned all kinds of interesting concepts and ideas coming out of that ancient culture in the Middle East. And so they brought those ideas back into the Catholic Church. They brought those ideas back into the fraternal orders of the Masonic orders in Europe today. And so a lot of people don't know that a lot of the teachings in Judaism and Christianity actually comes from the Knights Templars, the Masonic order inside the Catholic Church that dominated Europe. And of course, you'll have to remember that, Rome as a dictatorial power, Rome has dominated the earth for, 2,300 years. First of all, with the coming of the Republic of Rome, and then eventually under the Caesars of Rome, has dominated all of Europe. And then, of course, with the fall of Rome, about the 5th century A.D., the fall of Rome, you now have today the papacy, the Holy Father. The Pope is even referred to as the Pontifex Maximus, which was a term that was given to Caesar when Caesar ruled Rome. So we still have the Roman Caesar today, where all the peoples of the world, no matter who they are, no matter what their religion, what color they are, they all come to Rome and bow down on their knees and kiss the ring of the God Father, because he represents God, the Pope, and he is the Holy Father, so he's the Godfather. And so when you talk about the mob and the Godfather, yeah, you need to look at the Vatican. That's where the real Godfather rules from. That's why all the big-time gangsters and mafiosis in history, when they were shot down and murdered, they always had big Catholic funerals. And all the cardinals were out there, officiating over the big Catholic funerals of all the criminals. And you need to also check and find out why the Pope wears the Jewish yarmulke, the little cap that the Pope wears. We see it as a Jewish yarmulke, but the Pope wears it, and all the cardinals wear the same thing. So there's something going on with the Roman system. And so for 1,600 years under the Vatican has ruled Europe, period. All of Europe has been dominated by the Vatican. And for 1,600 years, the entire world of mankind has been dominated by Europe. So all roads lead to Rome. Ultimately, the Holy Father, as far back as the fall of the Roman Empire, the Holy Father has been the dominant power in Europe, and Europe has been the dominant power on the earth. So much for the presence of Almighty God. And a professor of mine one time said, when you're talking about these kind of subjects, you need to define your terms. So when you're using words in theology, you need to define what you mean by those words. So when you hear someone talking about God, I always ask, would you define what you mean about God? Because, a lot of people talk about God, but everybody has a different idea about what they're talking about. Most people have no idea what they're talking about. So my first entrance into this whole subject of religion is to look at the words and the terms and the symbols that have been used by different religions of the world, and look at the beginnings of things. Go back to the very day it began. And that's the way I like to do whenever I'm looking at any organization or church or philosophy. I like to see who started this idea, or who started this church, where did it begin, who put up the money, and how is it that we still are worshiping today something that was put up and started 1,600 years ago. And so in relation to Zionism, for instance, if we're talking about religion, let me just bring this little point in about Zionism. Because if you go back to the dictionaries, the encyclopedias, and you will find that back as far back as 1820, in the United States in 1820, there was a guy named Mordecai Noah. And he, with other fellow Jews, wanted to set up a Zionist homeland in America. And so they picked this the place of the new homeland back in 1820. They picked at Grand Island, New York. And that was where they began to proclaim that they were going to found the new Zionist home of the Jewish people in Grand Island, New York. Well, 1820s, that didn't work out. It fell through. That was okay because now in 1903, the British colonial secretary, Joseph Chamberlain, he suggested to Zionist Theodore Herzl, one of the main leaders of the Zionist movement. So back in 1903, British colonial secretary Joseph Chamberlain suggested to Theodor Herzl, that he should put the homeland for the Jews at the Mau Plateau in Kenya, Africa. The idea was referred to by the Zionists as the Uganda program. So it was pointed out by the British to the Zionists, why don't you take your homeland for the Jews and put it in Africa, put it in Kenya, Africa. But after talking about it and thinking about it, the governments of Kenya and England and the rest and the Zionists, it all fell apart. They decided, no, forget it. They didn't need the Zionist homeland in Africa after all, so it was a bad idea. So a couple of years later, in 1905, a large group of angry and frustrated European Jews, not in the Middle East, this was in 1905, a large group of angry and frustrated European Jews formed an organization called the Jewish Territorialists. And their organization was, the aim of which was, they said they wanted to be the founders of a Jewish homeland of some kind, somewhere. They needed to establish a Jewish homeland on earth. And so it was called the Jewish Territorialist Organization, 1905, and they wanted to just find somewhere for the Jewish homeland. Well, that didn't work either. So it fell apart. So later on, in 1928, in March of 1928, in the then Soviet Union, the Soviet Union suggested that the Russian Far East would be a great place. It was a great place for the homeland of the Jews. It was very far out, away from everybody. And so the communists said to the Zionists, why don't you put your homeland here in the Soviet Union? And so the new Soviet communist idea was called the Jewish Autonomous Oblast. Oblast. So this particular idea that the Soviet Union came up with in 1928, it, like the other three, it didn't go anywhere. It fell apart and nothing happened. Then in 1930, another brilliant idea was suggested by the British Zionist League. The British Zionist League in 1930 came up with a great idea that in Australia, there's a place called the Kimberley region in Australia. And that would be perfect for a Jewish homeland in Australia. So large, so incredibly large and spacious. And it was called the Kimberley region in Australia. And so they decided that was where the new homeland was going to be, 1930 in the Kimberley region of Australia. But after thinking about it for a few months, the Australian government officials, they said, no, not in our backyard. That's not going to work. So that one fell apart again. Later on, shortly afterwards, the Premier of Tasmania, Robert Cosgrove, came up with a dazzling idea. He suggested that the homeland for the Jewish people should be in Port Davey, D-A-V-E-Y, Port Davey area of southwest Tasmania. Now, this is the Premier of Tasmania, Robert Cosgrove, and he said, why don't the Jews put their homeland in Port Davey in southwest Tasmania? That would be a great idea. But he died shortly after the suggestion, and everybody decided, forget it, it's just a bad idea anyway. So that didn't work either. But finally, the Zionist leaders finally had the correct idea. They finally got a good idea. The Zionist Jews that were setting up the homeland for the Jewish people, God's chosen people, well, they decided this time they were going to go to the Lord. They were going to ask the Lord to help them. And so the Lord, did help them, and their homeland was set up. So it was a smart thing. After trying so many times and falling through, they finally went to the Lord, and the Lord did help them set up the state of Israel. So the Zionists went to Lord Rothschild, their Lord Philippi the Rothschild. And Rothschild, the Lord of the Jewish Zionists, he called one of his prostitutes named Lord Arthur Balfour. Everybody in England knew that Lord Arthur Balfour, one of the big politicians in England, was nothing more than a Rothschild, behind kisser, butt kisser, and that's all he's ever been. And so he was appointed by the British Israel Illuminati Masters of the World to be the one to go to the United Nations for Lord Rothschild and present this idea to the United Nations to have the Jewish homeland in the Middle East, and what we call the land of Canaan. And so they went into Canaan and just took it over. They didn't ask permission. They didn't ask anybody. They just went in with the British guns behind them, with the American military and government behind them, with the international Rothschild money and banking fraternities behind them. The Zionists went into the Middle East and just decided, we're going to take over a piece of land in the Middle East, and we're going to call it the land of Israel, and we'll say that God gave us this land, and anybody who don't like it, we'll kill them, period. So we're tired of asking permission. And so that's why today we still have the land of Israel, God's chosen people, which is nothing more than a Rothschild banking United States, British banking fraternities with their military behind the founding of the state of Israel. So, so much for the holiness in the Middle East, because I have been saying for years, and I'll say it again, there's nothing holy in the state of Israel or the Holy Land. There's nothing holy in the Holy Land. The reason why is because all the stories coming out of the Holy Land are full of holes. And so once you see that Israel today is nothing more than a political Rothschild, United States, British Empire political move on the world stage, of which behind the scenes the Vatican and the international criminal syndicates are behind the military movement in the Middle East. And so it's a very, very dark story about the whole idea of the Lord's chosen people. There is no such a thing as the Lord's chosen people. Israel was not a BC religion. The entire state of Israel today was started by the British Americans going through the United Nations and providing the money and the military backing to go in and just take the property and say, God gave us this property, so get out of here. We're taking it over. So much for God's chosen people. So anyway, we move down the line, and, if you ask a child today, ask a Christian child today if they believe in God, and they say yes, then you ask them, where is God? Where does he live? And so you ask the child, where is God? And they will point straight up. He's out there. He's in heaven. Well, if he's in heaven, he also has angels. Do you believe in angels? Yes. Well, where do the angels live? Where are they? They're out there with God. They're out there in the universe. So I don't know if you know this or not, but if you are from out there, like God in the angels, then you are extraterrestrial. But if you're from Alabama or live in New York, or you were born in Canada, then you are terrestrial, meaning you're from this earth. But we are to understand that God and the angels are not of this world, so that means they're out there, they're extraterrestrial. So there's an interesting story that probably you've never heard. I talked about it maybe once or twice on shows, but I think it bears repeating now. If you go back to a book today, which is you can still find in libraries and you can still buy it in the bookstores today, the book is called The Theogony of Hesiod. The Theogony is Theogony, Theogony of Hesiod, which is spelled Hesiod. The Theogony of Hesiod is a very thick book that you can find in the libraries or order it if you wish. You can still get it today. Hesiod was supposedly an illiterate herdsman living back about 700 BC in the ancient Grecian Empire under the ancient Greeks. And according to Hesiod, who was an illiterate herdsman, he said that in his book, The Theogony, he said that one night while he was out looking over and watching over his sheep, that three separate angels were glowing angels. They floated up to him. He said they didn't walk up to him. It was as they floated in the air up to him. And they called themselves, they told Hesiod that they referred to themselves as muses, M-U-S-E-S, muses, from which we get the word today, museum, or music, amusement, M-U-S-E, muses were the three angels that appeared to Hesiod, 700 BC. They said that they talked to, Hesiod said that they talked to him telepathically. And they told him, the three angels said that they wanted him to write a book about the gods that rule over our heavens, not the whole universe, but the gods that ruled over us, we humans, in our heavens. And so he told them that he was illiterate and couldn't read or write, and they said that would be fine because they would do something that they would call channeling, and they would overshadow him, and he would just put the pen to the paper, and they will write it for him. So they told him, don't worry about the fact you can't read or write. We will do the automated writing for you, and we will download for you the pecking order of the gods in your heavens. So it was a strange idea that these three angels came to Hesiod back in the ancient Grecian Empire and said to him, we want to tell you about the gods that are over this earth, and we want you to write it so other people can read it. And he said, I'm illiterate and I can't write. So they did the writing for him. And so it was called channeling. We still have the same kind of thing happening today where spirits will overshadow a person and talk through them. So anyway, then they went on to tell him that the God over our particular solar system in the Milky Way galaxy we're part of, and I do mean a small, tiny part of, but we're part of the Milky Way galaxy. And the muses, the angels, told Hesiod that in our galaxy, we have something called our solar system. And there is a God who has been appointed to be over our solar system. And he is the God over all human life and on the earth. So when you hear humans talking about God, the muses said that God's name is Zeus. Z-E-U-S, Zeus. And Zeus is the God of the earth, and he is the one that has created mankind and has the full dominion over the earth and all life on it. And so later we find out from the angels that Zeus lives on a floating city. They call it a floating city in the universe. And just outside of our solar system. that Zeus, our god, lives in a floating city in the constellation, in a star constellation of Cassiopeia. So there we have our God over the earth, according to the theogony of Hesiod. Our God is Zeus, and he lives in a floating city, and it's in a section of the star system called Cassiopeia. Very interesting. The Muses went on to tell Hesiod that if Zeus were to drop an anvil from his front porch and drop it down to the earth, if Zeus were to drop an anvil, it would take 9 days and 9 nights and so many hours for it to hit the earth. Well, it's fairly easy to calculate that distance at which an anvil would fall. So multiply that by 9 days and 9 nights and so many hours. And so it was easy to calculate the distance to a little over 3 million miles from Earth. And so according to Hesiod and the 3 muses, or the 3 angels, Zeus lives a little over 3 million miles from the Earth in a star system called Cassiopeia. And Zeus is our Father who art in heaven, because he's up there in heaven, a little over 3 million miles up there. And so our Father who art in heaven is Zeus. And hallowed be thy name, Zeus. And of course, so that's the name of that tune. So now, back in 1930, there was an American astronomer named Karl Jansky, K-A-R-L, Jansky, J-A-N-S-K-Y. An American astronomer named Karl Jansky, 1930. Karl Jansky built the first radio telescope, and he won the Nobel Prize and was called the father of modern radio telescopes. He then, Karl Jansky, also then built a radio transmitter to beam signals out into the heavens. And in the 1930s, just to see what might happen, I'm assuming that he had read the Theogony of Hesiod. So Karl Jansky, after the 1930s, with his new radio transmitter, he transmitted a signal to Cassiopeia, just for the hell of it. Sent out a strong signal to Cassiopeia. They said it was about 14.3 megacycles. And if you can believe it, he got back an intelligent signal that was amplified, but he didn't know what it meant or who sent it. But Karl Jansky sent out a message to Cassiopeia, and he got back an intelligent signal. And he said it was amplified, crystal clear, but he did not know how to read it or who sent it or what it said, but it was intelligent signal. And so incidentally, when Karl Jansky died, all of his notes were immediately taken from his office by, quote, men wearing black suits, men in black. I don't know what that tells you. Now, in the mid-1940s, a Scottish astronomer named Duncan Lunan, D-U-N-C-A-N, Duncan Lunan, L-U-N-A-N. He was working with Karl Jansky's radio telescope and transmitter, 1940s Scottish astronomer. And he, too, decided to send out a signal aimed at Cassiopeia just to see what would happen. And he, too, got back a signal about 20 seconds later, both intelligent and amplified. And he didn't know what to make of it either. He couldn't understand it, but it was highly intelligent, and it was amplified, crystal clear, intelligent answer. He just didn't know what the answer was. But Duncan Lunan narrowed the signal down to a particular light, a particular star in Cassiopeia, which today is called the Lunan object. You look it up in the dictionary, Lunan object, the Lunan object. And it was, the signal was coming from a particular star, a particular point of light in the Cassiopeia constellation. And that particular little piece of light, that little dot of light, we call the Lunan, what is it? The Lunan, wait a minute, there's so much document here. Object. It's called the Lunan object. Okay. Now, you can go in an encyclopedia and read about the Lunan object. Now, the word for God in Greek, the ancient Greek word for God is theos, Theos. And so the chief theos of God, the chief God of our area of the universe, was called Zeus. And therefore he was God the Father of all the other gods that we know. So in the ancient Greeks in prayer, it would be, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, Zeus. Zeus in the Middle East was very, very prominent as a god for many centuries. In the Middle East, they have a canal named after Zeus. It's called the Suez Canal. Suez is Zeus spelled backwards. So the Suez Canal was in honor of Zeus, the god of this world, the god of our earth. Now let's look for a moment quickly at the word Father. In the ancient Sanskrit language, Father is Pitar, P-I-T-A-R. Not Peter, P-E-T-E-R. No, Pitar, P-I-T-A-R. In the old Persian world, the word father is Pitta also, P-I-T-A. Sanskrit was P-I-T-A-R, but in the old Persian is P-I-T-A. While in the Greek and Latin, father is pater, P-A-T-E-R. Now you have pitter pater. You've probably heard that term. Well, pitter and pater is the father. In Sanskrit, Persian, and in Greek and Latin, the father is pater, P-A-T-E-R. So the ancient word for God was the pitter pater. Again, in ancient Greek, the father god named Zeus was referred to as Zeus pater, the father god. Zeus pater, or God the Father. In the Latin, God the Father was Zeus, but today we don't spell Zeus, Z-E-U-S. It's spelled D-E-U-S, Dios. And so Dios is God today. In Latin, Dios, no, Z-E-U-S, Zeus. And so in the ancient Rome, the god or Zeus was called I-U hyphen Peter, P-E-T-E-R, I-U and then Peter, which is Zeus in the Roman religion. I's are interchangeable with J. So Zeus or I-U hyphen Peter becomes J-U hyphen Peter or Jupiter. So Jupiter is I-U Peter. So while we're on the subject, the Greek Zeus became the Roman Jupiter. The Romans took the Greek Zeus and turned his name into Jupiter, Iupater. And another name for Jupiter was Jove, J-O-V-E, Jove. And that's in the Bible. So when you hear someone say that God is love, L-O-V-E, I've heard that for many years, and I thought, what are you talking about? That doesn't make any sense, that God is love. No, it's not God is love, L-O-V-E. It's God is Jove, J-O-V-E. J's and L's are interchangeable. So now we understand God is Jove, Jupiter, or Zeus, Pater. So, in the ancient world, it was believed that the god Zeus protected the royalty. he was said to be the Zeus, the god over the chosen, the royalty. So Zeus, the god, chooses who is to be royal, and he will protect the royalty. And they would then we today say that they ruled, the royalty ruled by divine right. And so today we have the kings who will tell you they ruled the empires by divine right. What do you mean divine right? Well, it means that the Pope, the Roman Catholic Pope, papacy, overshadows all business and religion in the world today, period. And so if the Pope appoints you and allows you to be a prince or a king or whatever, if he allows it, then you have a divine right because he represents Zeus, Pater, or Jew, Pater. And one last thing, God in Latin is Deus, D-E-U-S. And Deus in the old Persian is Diva, D-A-I-V-A, which means evil or demonic god. So by a dictionary definition, that means that Christianity worldwide is worshiping an ancient demonic god. Of course, that might explain some of the history and the bloodshed and human slavery over the last thousands of years. Another small point is that Zeus ruled from Mount Olympus. And we know now that there's about 15 other holy mountains like Mount Fuji in Japan, Mount Ararat in Armenia, Mount Athos in Greece, Mount Everest in Himalayas, Mount Shasta in California. So as you may have already figured out, Mount Olympus becomes the great Middle Eastern Arabic moon cult. And this is what was referred to, the moon cult was called Mount Sinai. So when you understand that the moon god in the ancient Middle East, thousands of years ago, the worshippers in the Middle East worshiped the moon. And this is why today they still worship the moon in the Middle East, and that's why their holy days and the Jewish holy days today are still after 6 o'clock in the evening. So Jews count their days from 6 in the evening to the next day at 6 in the evening. So from sundown to sundown is the Jewish day.